I wonder sometimes if many people think that God is something akin to or like one of the biggest party poopers of all. God just really wants to throw rain on our party. God at times seems to be against our desire to enjoy life, to do what we would like to do. So it's a good question, however you frame it, but the idea essentially is God a party pooper? Is God against enjoying life? The first reading seems to indicate that God barricades his people with statutes and ordinances, with laws, so that they cannot enjoy life the way they would like to. So they hear about the rules, the covenant, and so on. Many people today think that God and the Catholic Church are defined by or are reduced to rules, and more rules, all resulting in making life more difficult. Many people hear that God is always saying you can't do this, or the church says you can't do that. All of these things that seem to validate the feeling that God is against us from enjoying life or being happy, experience what we would call maybe flourishing. He wants to basically rain on our party, eliminate enjoyment. So it's important to ask and reflect on this question. Again, however you frame it, if it's not by these exact words, but is God just want to rain on our party of human happiness? Prevent us from doing the things that we feel are going to lead to a full, happy life. In the first reading, the people are about to enter the promised land, and Moses does remind them that they have to own the covenant and its binding rules. So there is the covenant. Remember, a covenant is not a contract. Very briefly, a contract is an agreement for the exchange of goods. You cut my lawn, I give you $20. That's a contract. This is not a contract, this is a covenant. So they have been blessed by God to have a covenant, which means I want to be in relationship with you. So I want you to be in relationship with me. So this is a covenant. It's much more binding than a contract. A contract ends when the terms have been met. A covenant goes on. Modern equivalent of this for us Catholics is we were baptized, most of us baptized as infants. But now we have to freely decide to accept the gift of Jesus and his church. So some people think of this as being born again, this free acceptance of the gift. It's not being born again. We're born again when we're baptized. But it is a personal validation of what was done for us when we were infants. All of us at some point have to do this, whether we understand it in the way I'm saying it or not. You have to make it your own. You can't just ride on the coattails of your parents saying yes for you. We have enough cultural Catholics in the world, and it's a disaster. So we have to own it. We have to make it personal. The people are going to find out very quickly that entering the promised land is not a playland. There are people there who will kill them, who will war against them, who don't want them around. And there are people there who will, if they're not careful, seduce them into false worship, the worship of idols. They will seduce them away from God. So they're going to find out this. They have a mission. This is actually going to require of them that they understand the serious business of this and that they need to live by God's laws and commandments. Moses teaches the people that the laws they are called to live will not only not take away their ability to enjoy life, to have fun, but it will actually lead the other nations to say the following: surely this great nation is a wise and discerning people. Why? For what other great nation has a God so near to it as the Lord our God is whenever we call him? So the nations knew, because they had scouts. They didn't have iPhones and telegraphs and all this kind of stuff, but they had scouts. So these Jews, they knew, had been in the desert for a long time, over 1 million people. How can 1 million people survive in hell, in a scorching hot desert, 100 degrees during the day, even more? How can they survive? It takes so much, you have the amount of water per day for over 1 million people, staggering, let alone the meat. How do they survive? They must be their God. Their God takes care of them. The Gentiles are thinking, they're concluding this. So this is the kind of thing that Moses is referring to. Other things as well, which I'll bring up. When we think about what God is calling us to, we can begin hopefully to conclude that God, in fact, is the furthest thing from a party pooper. But he is a wise God, a God who orders all things to our true human flourishing, not according to our definition, but according to what is actually truly good for us. Jesus made this very clear in John chapter 10, verse 10, when he said, "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy." That's the devil, ultimately, and all those who are allied with him. To steal, to kill, and destroy. They will lie to you, the enemy will lie to you, will seduce you away from true happiness. I came, he says, that they may have life and have it to the full. Have it to the full. This is not the life of perpetual ice cream, all right? It's not the life of the animal. The animal, the sensual satisfaction, full stomach, nice rays all day long. It's like a perpetual vacation on the beach. This is not what Jesus means by the fullness of life. He means the life of virtue, which is strength of character. It means total possession of oneself. The people who are really in control of themselves are the saints. And you and I experience this as we grow in our friendship with Jesus Christ. So we learn to say no to what we know is going to harm us. We know this is not good for us. And we are able to say no. Sometimes, all the time, if it's sinful. Sometimes, some of the time, if it's like food. We know when to stop, even though we want to have more. These are the people who are truly in control of themselves. They know when they need to apologize, so they're in control of their passions, their irascible appetites. They may fail, but they know how to correct it, and they'll do it, even if it goes against the grain. This is where cost is involved in living the life of virtue, but it's worth it. It's so worth it. So these two things, they can't coexist, wanting our own way and what God calls us to. So God really does want us to flourish. We can see this much more clearly when we look at the consequences of not following him, specifically in the sexual realm. Sexual promiscuity destroys the life of a community. It spreads disease. Specific sexual diseases would not exist if we held to monogamy, if we held to being faithful to God and to the person we wanted to marry in the future, even if we hadn't met them, so we don't have sex with anybody before marriage because I am saving myself for the one I'm supposed to marry. We wouldn't have sexual diseases. We know this intellectually. It results in unwanted children. Contraception is used, of course, which many people think will solve problems, and it doesn't. If it did, we wouldn't have all the divorces we have. And you say, well, what's the causal link? That's another 2 or 3 sermons. But when we separate essentially pleasure from responsibility, it's only a matter of time before things go majorly south. We have to be willing to sacrifice ourselves for the good of the other if we're going to have any modicum of happiness. So these children are often, if they are born or if they are conceived, many of them are killed in the womb, the abortion industry. Now, you have both parties in the United States saying abortion at least up to 6 weeks or right up to the time of birth. My God, do they realize where the country is going with this kind of mandate or with this kind of political position? As eventually, this is the republic is going to disintegrate. And Canada is not maybe ahead of them. We cannot exist when we have this kind of position, when human life is made expendable. So these children are often killed in the womb or outside of it, or they are abandoned if they actually are brought into this world. Child slavery is a huge industry in many parts of the world. Promiscuity undermines marriage by encouraging a culture and mindset of faithfulness to one person for life, which is necessary for successful and loving marriages and child raising. Is it difficult? Well, just listen to the apostles after Jesus talked about the indissolubility of marriage. They said, are you serious? Really? Better remain single. Jesus says, basically, what you've got right here is unaided human nature. That's what's going to happen. You can't do it. But he said, with God, all things are possible. So if you rely upon the Lord, if he brought over 1 million people through the desert in 40 years, you don't think he can help you not only get married, but stay married and actually be happy and help each other get to heaven? Like, how big do we think God is? Or how small sometimes we think God is. So even the requirement of the church, to be married in the church for the validity of a marriage for a Catholic, this is not God of the church trying to take away people's happiness, but is helping a couple to prepare properly for marriage and to ensure that they know what they are doing. They're treading on holy ground, because a person is going to invest their life with you. I'm going to invest my life with you. It's like, what can be more serious? What can be more profound? A person is going to give their life to you. So the church wants to make sure, to the best of her ability, that a couple knows what they're doing, that each of them knows what they're doing, and that they know what the other one knows what they're doing. The assumption is the mother of all disasters. Well, I assume they know. Don't assume anything. That's why we need to talk. People think they know all they need to know about marriage, so they get married perhaps in the court or the backyard or whatever, but the divorce rate says otherwise. And it's not because they're bad, but because they don't really go in with a full awareness of this. They don't realize that sacrifice is necessary. This is where the Lord has to be a part of our life. God is the furthest thing from a party pooper. His laws really are ordered to human flourishing. He really does want us to be truly happy. Moses calls the people to adhere to God's covenant to show that God is not against them enjoying life, but God is wise, and the people are wise when they follow him. God really does want us to flourish. What's important for each of us to reflect on is that human flourishing only comes about with sacrifice, and that means the need to stay close to Christ and receive the sacraments often. We might fail often, but we never stay down. As one leader I've been listening to quite a bit has said, when you're down on the ground, you've fallen, learn down there, learn what you can when you're down. Don't just say, poor me. That's what we're tempted to do. Or, I'm never going to rise up. I'm never going to actually conquer this. Learn when you're down on the ground what I can learn down here, so when we rise again, we can actually go forward and maybe make some improvements. Have I been relying upon Jesus enough? Am I sacrificing myself? We all need to do this. I need to do this every single day. The takeaway with this week, think of a time when you denied yourself for love of God. It has to be for love of God. So it could be a time of fasting, maybe during Lent, or you gave to the needy, gave to the poor, or forgave a friend when it was really difficult. Or perhaps you just said no to pornography. Like, you actually were able to do that. You said no. You were tempted and you said no. No, 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 no. I don't need to do that. I don't want to do that. Lord, help me to say no. That's a good no. That's a constructive no. That's a positive no. Think of one time and ask yourself this question. Did this take away my true happiness? Because God says, don't do this. Or God says, do this. I want you to be fasting. Did making the sacrifice take away my long-term happiness or my immediate happiness? Or did it result in a little bit or a lot of human flourishing in my life? Did I feel truly better about this? God is not a party pooper. In fact, God wants me and wants you to be flourished. He says to us every single day, give me a chance, I'll show you this.